Bonnie, look at this table. We've got a ton of material here. We've got base 10 blocks. We've got algebra tiles, dominoes.
Ah, and these things.
Oh, those are pattern blocks.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so we have all these different tools that are here. But you know, we have a bunch of adult educators who really think this is a little bit too childish
Are you sure?
for our adult learners. Well, they're afraid, kind of going into the whole thing, they're a little concerned about how their students will react to this.
Okay.
But the reality is our students need hands-on learning activities in the classroom. I mean, think about it. We do this in so many other things, but we don't do it when we come to adult education itself, and especially math.
So true. You know, and I've never understood that because most of the time when we first learn any new thing, we learn it by hands-on. We have
True.
to do it. In fact, if we don't do it, we forget it very quickly.
Well, we've learned a lot of rules.
Oh,
And
so true.
in mathematics, we do. We learn a lot of different rules. The only thing is, it's kind of like that whole thing with geometry. You know, I had a teacher who taught a lot of rules, but didn't tell me how to apply them. But underneath it all, I really didn't get the concepts. And what our adult ed students have to have is they really need the concepts, because it would be really terrible, I think about it, of being an adult and I just can't grasp this particular area. In fact, it's probably a reason why we lose a lot of adults as we go through. And now, you know, as we take a look forward, we've got some other issues we're going to have to deal with.
Are you talking about those college and career readiness standards?
I am. I mean, if that's going to change, I think they use the word that they're going to do some major shifts in how we look at teaching mathematics. So maybe these things will actually come into vogue.
I agree. You know, when I looked at those major shifts, one of them that I thought was, oh, wow, is they're going to have to teach algebra and geometric thinking skills as low as the lowest ABE level.
True.
And it makes sense because we all know that in the K through 12 system, our youngsters are learning algebraic thinking in kindergarten. No longer do they have, do you have those little boxes where it said 3 plus 2 equals?
Oh yeah.
Remember that?
Well, I mean, that's the way so many of the books were always set up, is you had this little box, and so you added or you subtracted and you put your little answer over there. But you know, the things that I'm beginning to see now, rather than having a little box, they have an X.
Yes, they do.
Or a Y. They may have other things as well. But it's getting people comfortable and also having them have a deep conceptual understanding of what we can do. Okay, so let's take a look very quickly. We have this whole slew of things here, you know, and some of these you can find at your local Walmart or at a teacher store. I mean, there are different places that you can get them, but how can we use them? Well, so tell me about the base 10s.
Let's take a quick look. Base 10 blocks are exactly what they say. We have 100 block. We have 1,000 block. We have 10 blocks. We have 1 blocks. And what it allows our students to do is to see how much. Okay, how many hundreds fit into the 1,000? How many?
So we're really looking at number operations and a sense of numbers there.
Definitely.
So that's the foundation, which you could start at the very low levels. Okay, so if we have that foundation for understanding numbers as a whole, then where can we go from there?
Then we go into fractions, and we've all seen those pie charts.
Well, we've seen the pie charts, but we've also seen the reality that in many of the classrooms that we have out there right now, where do they start in math instruction? It's with fractions because students haven't mastered them to this point.
And you know, our students have misconceptions with fractions because they've been told for so long, if I multiply 2 numbers, I get a larger number. If I divide 2 numbers, I get a smaller number. And yet when we get into fractions,
that doesn't work.
It doesn't. So how do I teach students fractions and how they work? It's all called manipulatives.
And when I take a look at something like that, then it seems to me that basically what students are doing with these things is that they're beginning to draw their own conclusions.
Yes, they are.
Okay.
You can also use fraction tiles like this where students can intersperse different parts of a fraction on a whole. And
Oh,
this will
true.
teach the concepts of not only adding and dividing, or adding and subtracting, I'm sorry, but multiplying and dividing. But you've got something that looks like something I would just see in the local store.
Well, that's true because purchasing something like this can get a little pricey if you go to a local
That's true.
education store. But I can actually use a deck of cards and I can come through and I can talk about different fractions as I'm moving through. So we could actually form fractions. We could have, and you pull cards and you go, oh, well, that's 2/3. Or maybe I have something like this where I have 2/6. And could I reduce that? Sure, I could. But I have to understand the skill as I'm going through.
So I can make games that are fun.
There are lots of games that are out there. In fact, there are many of them that are on the Florida Tech Net website. So you may want to go back and check out some of those as well. But look, fractions. Why do I need a worksheet? When all I have to do is roll dice and I can form fractions and I can keep getting different ones all along. But, big but, I know that in some places I can't use dice.
That's true.
But I can go back and I could use dominoes. Same thing. And you know, if I don't have dominoes that I go and purchase, I could actually use a template and I could make my own set of dominoes. And I could do it with paper. So if you're working in a correctional facility, that may be the way that you want to go.
But we also need to talk about geometric thinking. Of course, we all know that the first step is visualization.
True.
Second step is analysis. And I can use pattern blocks. Sometimes we see these in elementary, that's true. But if students can use pattern blocks, pattern tiles, and I can buy them all different ways, then again, I can see how shapes go together, such as how triangles can form different shapes. Wow. That's
Okay.
interesting.
So
But
I
I've got
have
something
a lot
else
of
there.
I have a lot of different possibilities with those. And again, I can start with the basics, but
True.
let's consider that most of our students coming through, they have difficulty with fractions. They also have difficulty when it comes to basic geometry. So I can also use, now you have to watch these rubber bands because sometimes those could be considered a lethal weapon. But I can make different shapes and I can see the properties of those shapes by using a geo board.
And you know, I could compare contrast and see how changing perimeter could change area.
And I can do irregular figures because sometimes I have to calculate the perimeter of a regular figure. So I've got to go through and I can look at all of those different things.
But you know, those are my favorite.
Well, I think so too. And a big part of that is the fact that algebra is really the gatekeeper for our
is.
students when they want to move on, whether it's in to the workplace or if they're going on to post-secondary education. Algebra is all about mathematical reasoning. It's about learning how to be logical with things.
But it's fun.
Well, it is fun, but it's not fun when you're sitting there as a student and you're faced with 2x plus 3y equals what? How do I know?
True.
Or maybe
Or-
I'm supposed to do a factor. What's a factor? What are
Use
polynomials?
FOIL.
Oh,
Just use FOIL.
that's another
Okay.
one of those rules. And if you remember, FOIL is that first, outer, inner, and last. Students, they say, okay, I got the formula.
But
Why? Why did it work that way? So with algebra tiles, I can actually go through and I can see why it works as we're moving through.
You know, I taught with algebra tiles. I could teach everything from multiplying, dividing, adding, subtracting, up to quadratic equations. And my students really understood why.
But it even starts earlier than that. We
that's
have
true.
students who struggle with using positive and negative integers. They have difficulty trying to figure out, am I supposed to take the sign and change it? Do I leave it the way it is? All of those things from algebra tiles. So, looks to me as if we go across the board here and we look at all these different things, putting manipulatives into the classroom could make a big difference. Our students would get the conceptual understanding that they need, which then will make them more effective with their mathematical reasoning. And I think it will go on further than that.
Oh, I agree. And you know, if you're interested in more information on manipulatives, as you see, there's a vast array of them that you can either purchase or you can make, because let's face it, there's so many things that we have that work well. But if you are interested in more information, there's a full handout for you on FloridaTechNet.org, all about math manipulatives, as well as some templates that you can use in the classroom. So if you're interested in manipulatives, and quite honestly, Susan, I'm hoping all of our teachers are, because it is about effective teaching. Go to FloridaTechNet.org and access this handy-dandy template book.
That sounds great. FloridaTechNet.org. That's your homepage for all things working with manipulatives.
And thank you.